Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm so excited that you're here with us tonight. We're going to start in about a minute. So just get comfy, get a little something to drink, and we will jump into our author talk in about 60 seconds. So, yeah.
Hopefully I won't wiggle too much. I got a bum leg up here on a ottoman, so
Oh, that's a
if my
bummer.
camera starts jiggling, then you know that's me moving my leg.
No. Hope it's better soon.
I know. It's like, ouch. You never
Aw.
know how much you need a part of your body until it hurts.
All right, we are going to get started. Welcome, welcome. This is an author talk between me, Lynne Golodner, and my friend Paulette Stout. And I'm so excited that you guys are here with us tonight. This is the first in a series of author talks that I'm going to be hosting this year. And I'll tell you more about some next ones coming up at the end. But tonight, Paulette and I are here to discuss romance novels with passion and purpose. And we're going to talk a little bit about both what we write and what trends we're seeing in the romance genre that are really taking the stories beyond just passion and adding depth and context and big issues to the story as well. So again, welcome, and we will have question and answer toward the end, and we'll be giving away some free books to lucky winners who are here by the end of the call, so stick around with us. And so here we go. I'm Lynne Golodner. I'm based in Detroit. I am the author of 12 books, and three of them are novels that I've pivoted to in the past few years. I've been a journalist and a marketing expert, and I am the mom of four young adults, so I'm a busy person. My latest novel is called I Love You, Charlie Tanner. Paulette, will you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Paulette Stout. I'm an author of contemporary romance with spice and purpose, which is why we're here talking about this today. There are four novels in my Bold Journey series, and I've also have two anthologies, and I'm working on my next work. By day, I work in marketing. I'm director of brand at a software company on the Nat listed on the NASDAQ, and I have two adult children who are off doing goodness what knows what.
I love it. And you're based in?
Oh, based in Massachusetts.
Awesome. Awesome. Great. So, we're going to just start off this conversation since we're talking about romance with a definition of what exactly romance is in fiction. Paulette, you are so good at this. Will you enlighten us?
Yes, there's some very specific kind of guideposts that govern romance. So, romance is a story that centers on the relationship formation between two people. And it could be like an initiation, or it could be like a second chance, like a rekindling of what was once in the past. Like a few key things that have to happen in romance. One is both characters need to be alive at the end of the book. So there's a lot of controversy, Nicholas Sparks, about different books, and like they need to be alive at the end. Another piece that is essential is that you have a happily ever after or a happily for now, an HEA or HFN. And those are the characters end up with and it also needs to have an optimistic ending where you know this couple is going to make it and be happy in the future. So those are kind of some non-negotiables about romance. So when we're talking about romance, we're talking about it within that context and then how we layer in that purpose piece.
That's awesome. And so, as we were planning for this, I sort of came to the conclusion that I don't really write romance. Although I think my second novel, Cave of Secrets, which I will be giving away at the end, is the one that I think could qualify as romance. I think Paulette agrees with that. But mostly my books are either upmarket fiction or book club fiction. And there are romantic elements and there's a lot of spice, but I don't follow the typical formula of romance. So I would say that I have big issues in my books, and we'll get into that later. But Paulette, can you share a little bit about first of all, I'd love to know why you write romance, like what brought you to it, and then just talk a little bit about your approach to it.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, I went on a personal journey, my own little sexual journey as an adult woman, like trying to find how my body worked, how I could, feel pleasure in the bedroom. And that was like, once I figured that out, it became like a little bit of an obsession with me. And I felt like if I was struggling with this stuff, then other people might too. And it became, like a tool almost in storytelling. So there's that piece where I want to recognize that this is an important part of the human experience, this intimacy between two characters. I think it's a fantastic way to build conflict, to advance plot, to, even express personalities through those, intimate relationships. So for me, intimacy and romance is a powerful tool of like humanity. And I think that people undervalue romance sometimes because they feel like, oh, we're just falling in love. But love is a central piece of the human experience. And I think that when romance goes beyond that and explores the characters' humanity, their lives, their challenges, their hopes, their dreams, I think that that's a really great book. And I think that's why the genre does so well.
Yeah, it's one of the best-selling genres out there, and that and thrillers usually. And so it's fascinating but I think you're right. You're hitting on something that love is essential to every human being. And frankly, what we see, when there's trauma, when there's violence, it's usually from a lack of love. And so this is a need that we all have and that we pursue throughout our lives, and it is very powerful. I love that you write about, finding pleasure and intimacy and that sometimes is like a little bit of a no-no for some people, but I think it's so powerful and it needs to be talked about too. And books can be a way to work out real issues, right?
Yes, that's 100%. I think that when I first started writing Love Only Better over my shoulder, which we'll be giving away later, it was because I felt like I wanted to connect to more people that might have had the same challenges that I had. I
Mhm.
felt like if I've had all these challenges, there must be other people out there having them too. And when I was looking for information, the information was either dry and clinical, like in a medical book, or it was like super spicy, like you want to like look through your fingers. It's like, I'm really not into that stuff, folks.
Right.
So writing that kind of story in a novel helps convey like really important life lessons, information, but in a really entertaining way. So you kind of don't feel like you've acquired knowledge, but you have.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, I think that's really powerful. I write a lot of very steamy sex in my novels, but there are deeper issues. And the reason I include sex, and people always ask this in book club conversations or author talks, is because we all crave it and we all have our own issues with it. And I was raised with the focus on like keeping it private and like you should be ashamed. And, if you're a woman and you enjoy sex, you're a slut, but men can do anything, so this like dichotomy was really, really troubling. And I want to show women who are strong and embracing of their sexuality. I want to show that it's an important part of a healthy relationship too. So let's talk a little bit about how we look at purpose in our books. And I can start off, but I have three novels. So I have Woman of Valor, Cave of Secrets, and I Love You, Charlie Tanner. Woman of Valor, and I don't know if you agree with this, Paulette, but I find, especially because I'm a writing coach, most authors' first novels more closely resembled their own lives than subsequent novels. Do you think that's true?
Oh, 100%. My
Yeah.
editor had a big conversation with me about it on my first novel.
Yes. So
She's
Woman
like, "You are not Rebecca. She can do something different than you, girl." So that was always like a challenge for sure.
For sure. So a woman of valor is the closest to me, but it's not me. So I spent 10 years in the Orthodox Jewish world and I left it. It didn't work for me, but there were beautiful things. And I wanted to write about an Orthodox Jewish woman who was a strong woman who defied the stereotypes that are out there of Orthodox Jews. But yet she found challenges in her community and had to choose whether to stay or to leave it. While I left it, I wanted her to stay. I wanted her to find a way to reconcile the ugly with the good and find a way to find herself in it. But her relationship with her husband Barry is very spicy, and people are shocked. They're like, why, this is a religious woman. How can they have so much good sex? And I'm like, well, first of all, have you ever seen Orthodox families? Lots of kids, but
Children come from somewhere, y'all.
right, but also like there's actually a rabbinic mandate that a husband is obligated to please his wife sexually. And I also was like, what is wrong with that? Why should we hide it? Why not have this really passionate relationship? And then I'll just touch on because I don't want to talk too much. I don't want to go to you. But in Cave of Secrets, I look at issues of anti-Semitism and the aristocracy. I have LGBTQ issues in that book. There is some religion in there as well. And so those are some of the big issues that I tackled there. Also, the political situation in Scotland with England in the 18th century. And I Love You, Charlie Tanner, there's a lot of things. I mean, there's a protagonist at midlife who is in a cult-like commune. She leaves after the death of a partner and sort of reconnects to her family's roots, but she has deep trauma. And there's some extra spicy sex with a hot rabbi, and she has to look at issues of control and what she's comfortable with and sort of come into herself. And so each of my books are tackling big issues because even though there's love, and I want happy endings, we all have big issues. And I think we want to see real people on the page. So, Paulette, how about you? How do you approach this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this for me, I just something occurs to me. I watch something in the news or I experience something in my life, and there's an issue that I feel like we should be talking about a little bit more. And I also look at my books as a way to grow and learn about the world. So, for instance, my first book was about the main character doing what I did. She was finding her sexual pleasure and figuring out, finding her tingles. And then that kind of blossomed into a romance, but that like bubbles up confidence. My other books were my second book took on the issue of Me Too from kind of like a male perspective with a male survivor and a female aggressor, and it's set in fashion publishing, so it's kind of got like a Devil Wears Prada gone wrong vibe.
Fun.
But that is also an issue because at the end of the Me Too movement, like men started stepping forward, but people were kind of snickering at them and not taking it seriously. So I thought that a really sensitive, established character like Kyle from Love Only Better in my book one having to go through some of those issues was a really powerful thing. And 1 in 6 men experience unwanted sexual advances and touching, and like no one ever talks about it. So, and then in my third book, I take on the issue of race, class, and belonging because I was at the time reading a lot of women's fiction and even some romance, and they were just like a real dearth of strong black female characters who were not impoverished, who were not on the brink of death, who were successful and established and professional and come from successful families. And I felt like that character needed to be seen on the page. And I built out her journey around experiencing corporate America as a black woman and then having an interracial romance. And that also took on class because the male character was raised in a single parent home. He was system involved. And they ended at the same place. So you have a white man from a disadvantaged background and a very affluent black woman. Like who's got the privilege? So it came like a really interesting tension there. And in book four, I took on the issue of weight, body size, and our cultural obsession with thinness. It was something that I was experiencing myself as a fat person, and why do we have to be thin, and what's the real data behind it? And I did a ton of research in that area as well for book four.
So, I want to just say, okay, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm going to say it because this romance genre, what I see so often is this trope of a guy who's like super hunky, 6'3", 250 pounds, like the hottest thing ever, and he's kind of gruff and toxically masculine. And the woman is 5 feet tall, as thin as they come, doesn't lift a finger to cook or to work out, wears bodycon dresses and 4-inch heels, and she always needs to be saved by the guy. And so when we're talking body image, like, oh my God, does it make me crazy? I mean, those people exist, but I just don't understand.
Yes.
That's always the dream couple. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so like in my book four, I have what's called a BBM, a big beautiful man. He's a large guy.
Uh-huh.
He's not not a big hunky guy. He's handsome and established, but he's a large man. Like that
Sure.
that's the male character.
Yeah.
And the female character gains weight throughout the book. She has an eating disorder and she gains weight to be what her right size is. Her whole family is large and she's been like kind of starving herself her whole life and
Okay.
wondering what the issue is.
Okay.
So, like the journey for that book was gaining weight and seeing how society treats you differently when you're in a different body size.
Okay.
So it had like some interesting dynamics. I agree with you. I'm definitely being conscious in my new book that I'm writing right now. It is a sapphic romance, and the main character is a large woman.
Yeah.
So she is not a little petite something, and both of the women, female leads, neither of them are, what we call street size in like kind of fat liberation circles.
I cannot wait to read it. So that sounds amazing. I have LGBTQ issues in Cave of Secrets and I Love You, Charlie Tanner. More so in Cave of Secrets because there's four protagonists really, and so there's Eve who's American, and her father Sam, and he's gay, and he was raised Orthodox and left his family to be out and raise his daughter. His wife died in childbirth, but she knew he was gay, and she like threatened him to take their child if he ever came out, and then she died in childbirth, and so he raised
Mm,
Eve on his own, and he was so afraid to be in a relationship because he'd been rejected for being out by his family. And that's a real issue. I've known people in the Orthodox community who are gay and they cannot come out. And so it's ostracizing. But I wanted it to be, like a beautiful, I wanted his relationship to blossom as well as Eve's, which is the main relationship, and to find himself, to find love within himself as well as externally. And I think that's a huge issue, but how has feedback been to your books when you raise these issues, which are real and also not seen very much? So what are you hearing from readers?
It's really interesting. I think part of it depends on how I'm marketing them, frankly, and who I'm attracting to the stories. In the beginning, I was a little uncertain about my genre and my packaging was a little bit off. Like I had my covers that looked kind of like a rom-com. Do I have one here? Yes, I have my original cover here. Like it looked like a rom-com,
Yeah.
like my first cover. So I attracted readers who had a certain expectation about the story. So
Uh-huh.
when there were more serious themes in there, and there were some of these, purposeful themes we've been talking about, they kind of weren't, they didn't feel like they had signed up for them. So I felt like that was on me for not properly marketing the book and attracting the right readers.
Sure.
But once I got that nailed and I'm attracting the right readers, people are really enjoying the stories. And I think that there is definitely a movement. I've been seeing a lot of it more on social, especially on TikTok, where people were beginning to kind of move away from contemporary romance towards fantasy and dark fantasy because they felt like they took on more weighty themes,
Sure.
within the stories.
Hmm.
So, I'm kind of like, if you're in that boat, come on board,
Yeah.
read Lynn's books, read my books, because we are talking about real world issues. Just last week, the famous author Kennedy Ryan was talking about, why does romance need to turn a blind eye to the real issues of the day? And I was like, we don't. And
Right.
I don't. And I know you don't either.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. Yeah, it's interesting because people love my books and a lot of Jewish readers read my books because I always have Jewish identity themed through it. And they like to see positive Jewish representation on the page. We're not very popular in in society lately. So it's nice to see something positive about Jewish identity. But I have heard from some people about, like, in Cave of Secrets, when Sam's family rejects him because he's gay, or some of his family do. I heard from an Orthodox reader who's like, she loved the book, but she was uncomfortable with that. And I said, but it's true. I mean, at least she reached out to me, which was great. And we had a conversation about it. And I said, but that that happens, and especially in a more ultra Orthodox setting, that's really not acceptable. And she said, I know. I wish that it were more accepted. And she knows families, and I know families who are more accepting. So things are changing. And maybe that's the kind of book I should write next. I don't know. But in Woman of Valor, it's interesting. There basically the real conflict in the book. Well, one of the real conflicts is that some abuse happens at the children's school, and I was a little nervous writing that because when I was in the Orthodox world, I remember there was a big scandal about unlicensed daycares and some children who got really neglected and in danger, and I was horrified, and I was like, we all have a responsibility to call Child Protective Services. This is a scandal. This should not be allowed. But there's this sense of the family, the community sort of coming together as a family and like protecting itself against the outside world. And I have that in the book. And a lot of Orthodox people are uncomfortable but accepting of this topic because they know it's real. They know it needs to be talked about.
Yeah, and that raises a really interesting point, Lynn, because I think that one of the reasons why I like writing these purposeful themes is to shine a light on what is to
Mhm.
create change. So
Yeah,
I feel like I do kind of do both in mind. I show, the harshness of the reality, and then I show the main character kind of fighting against it and triumphing in the end. So I feel like doing that, especially like in a romance context where you want to have that optimistic ending, is really helpful. So I feel like there's room to take on those, difficult themes in a realistic way to shine a light on them, but then having that optimistic twist at the end for the romance reader will kind of, I think, help readers feel like, yeah, it was a satisfying read for them.
I agree. And I think it also manifests positivity, which we all need. And like, why not work out real life problems with optimistic solutions in fiction? And then maybe that's a model for real life. Like in Woman of Valor, I wanted Sally to want to stay in orthodoxy, but not be able to tolerate abuse. And so how could, she address it and still maintain her foothold in the community that she chose? I think that has to be possible. And so I figured maybe people in that situation in real life would leave and just say, I'm done with this. But maybe there's a way to reconcile it and redeem the community by bringing out big issues and addressing them and still staying within who you are. I think that's important.
Yeah.
It's got to be
Yeah,
fun.
and I think that, yep, and for sure. And I think one of the things that I do, and I take a lot of effort in my books, is to engage with expert sensitivity readers to kind of go through some of these issues. So I was my own sensitivity reader for the first one. But for the second one, where the male character is going through, sexual assault trauma and counseling, I spoke to therapists for in my third book where I was writing a black character. I am not a black woman. I'm a woman of color, but I'm not black. And I had like a group of black women that I worked with for over a year to make sure I got it right and to touch on those aspects. And for the fourth book where I was writing about food and diet culture, I engaged with nutritionists to read the story. I gave it to Meta, which is the Massachusetts Association for Eating Disorders, and they were able to kind of coach me through some of those, um, anorexia treatment and some different issues around there where maybe I hadn't worded things in the most sensitive way. So I think that getting feedback from different communities that you're representing in your stories is super important. And I'm sure you do that too.
It's essential. It's essential. I've had LGBTQ sensitivity readers in my for my books that deal with that issue. I've had Orthodox readers when I'm writing about Orthodox because I was, but I'm not anymore. My next book has a Catholic priest as a character, so I've had some Catholic clergy read it, and I also have some medical things, and so I've had some doctors both advise me before and then
Yeah.
read it after and tell me, did I render it accurately? You got to do that. I mean, otherwise,
No, totally.
yeah.
Yeah, it was funny in my restaurant scenes in my fourth book, I had someone who worked in a high-end, restaurant kitchen. Like, am I talking about the food preparation? Would they be using wooden cutting boards or, plastic cutting boards? And they were like wood always, and all these different things. And then they were able to add texture of things that I wouldn't even have thought of. So, there was just one scene where they're in the kitchen and I said that all they heard was like the simmer of the stove. Like, well, actually the hood would be on. You would hear the
Oh,
little hood on there too. And we would wrap them this way in the saran wrap. And when I was making my therapist character for my second book, I had this kind of old grizzled, like Freudian type guy. But when I spoke to the counselor, she was like, people who are working with young men in the sexual assault area are like working more peer to peer. So this would be probably someone in their 30s, not in their 60s. And,
okay.
so just those are, you don't know what you don't know until you talk to like the people who are in those roles or communities.
For sure, for sure. So let's talk about some authors we might recommend who are including purpose into their romances pretty well. So maybe I'll offer one, then you offer one. We can go back and forth.
Sure, sure.
So the first one I want to say is my friend Lisa Piers, who's a lesbian romance author, writing lesbian romance. And her newest book just came out, Motor City Love Song, which was interesting in terms of sensitivity readers. But that one has lesbian romance, menopause and midlife issues, body image issues. But another sensitivity reader that she needed, or a few of them, is that it's about the 90s punk rock scene in Detroit. And she needed to check in with musicians and make sure that it was all like, did this happen? Where, she couldn't name any of the
Yep,
real
yep.
bands or any of the real songs. And so her cleverness at coming up with band names and song names, and it's hilarious. It's great. So, but Lisa Piers, lesbian romance, menopause, midlife, body image. It's amazing. Yeah. What's one of yours?
Kennedy Ryan, I love. I know I mentioned her once. She's just my little goddess author. She is a black author who writes about like the affluent black experience for the most part. And her Skyland series of three stories, takes on all kinds of issues. This could be us. It's got neurodivergence, it's got, kind of postpartum, grief, and it's got talks on, staying at home mom and singlehood, and then it's, other books in this series take on the DEI landscape that's so topical right now. So that she doesn't shy away from big issues. Her character Hendrix in the third book um is single by choice in her 40s, and that's something I'm also taking on in my third book. So that I really appreciate her approach to romance where the characters developing and navigating these really difficult issues, mothers with parents with dementia and things like that. But then you've got like some slamming against the wall spice in there that's like super satisfying.
I love that. That's well, you need the balance, right?
Yep, yep.
You know. So another one that I'll mention, which I did not expect to put on my list, but Rachel Reed, who wrote He Did Rivalry, the whole Game Changer series.
Mm.
I don't. Okay, I'll say a lot, but I won't say a lot. The Long Game, which is the sixth book in the series, I think, and that's the sequel to Heated Rivalry. It really tackles big issues, and so there's homophobia, there's LGBTQ acceptance in mainstream sports, there's toxic masculinity, in a big way. There's transphobia. There's really talking about changing the culture in hockey in particular. But it's about gay love and commitment and being able to be all sides of yourself. And I think it does a really good job of it, to be honest.
Yep.
What's another good?
Danielle Allen, Curvy Girl Summer. It's got a purple cover with a woman in a yellow dress. You might have seen it around on social. I kind of dove in finally, and it was just such a beautiful story because the heroine is a large-bodied woman, and she just gets so much hate and toxic behavior from people in her family, people that she's trying to date, people that she works with. It's just from all angles, and that's the real life that people in large bodies lead. And I think she handled it really beautifully. And the character is finally able to stand up for herself. But weight and body size is so prevalent in our culture
Yeah,
that, having someone handle it that well, like in the context of a romance, I thought she did a really good job.
I can't wait to check that out because in romance, we really need to see more body sizes for sure.
Yep, for
All
sure.
sorts. Okay, so my last one is Heidi Shertok, who is an Orthodox Jewish romance novelist, and she is really good at keeping orthodoxy, beautiful and explained and accessible. But she also tackles infertility and racism. She brings up the topic of Black Jews. There's not all Jews are white, and really deals with it. But also, there's
I'm Jewish.
right, and so I think that confronting infertility, which is a major problem in the Orthodox world, you're supposed to, be fruitful and multiply, and racism, that even though you're all Jewish, but you maybe have different skin tones, why aren't people accepted equally? And these are like issues we need to talk about and get out there. So she does an amazing job. She's also hilarious. And if you read her latest, Match Me If You Can, you will literally be laughing out loud. It's just very funny. It's done well. What's your last one?
Um, Rebecca Yarros is known a lot for her fantasy stuff, but she also has a lot of romance, both contemporary and historical, and some kind of dual timeline things. She just writes really beautifully and deeply about kind of like grief and loss and war and parental abandonment and things like that, and um, like in a very contemporary way, So I appreciate that. So if you're not into the fantasy, check out The Romances by Rebecca Yarros.
Awesome. So we've
I also
talked.
want to say one really quick thing because you were talking about your Jewish identity so much. I haven't talked about mine today, but my first two books have biracial characters, and there's a Jewish wedding like in my second book. So it has one of my
Yay!
favorite endings ever
Awesome. Awesome.
in my
Awesome.
second book.
Yes. So we've talked a little bit about some of the trends that we're seeing in purpose-centered romance. Do you want to speak about that a little bit? Like what you're seeing coming up or what you hope you'll see, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm just welcoming people taking on these issues because initially it felt really unwelcome. And I felt like, and I think that's why I kind of was thinking my books might have been women's fiction at the beginning because it was like, oh, I'm taking on these issues. They have to be women's fiction, but they're really not because women's fiction readers really do not like the open door spice. It's a little bit of a pearl clutching situation. So, and everyone who was reading the books and on the book reviews, we're calling it a romance. So at some point, you need to kind of listen to the readers, give them
Sure,
what they
yeah,
want.
for sure.
So yeah, I think it's more of a trend of recognizing that it's okay to talk about big issues in romances as long as you hold true to those guideposts that we talked about at the beginning of the call.
Yeah, absolutely. But I will take issue with the complaint that women's fiction readers don't like to see spice because I don't know if I mean, again, we talked about this before we came on the call. I don't really know what genre I am. Like, I'm going to say upmarket book club. I still don't know what that means, but probably my books are women's fiction because the big transformation is of the woman from start to finish. But there's a ton of spice, and I've never had complaints about it. So I don't know. Do you really think that all women's fiction readers object to spice? Really? Like, truly?
I think that just based on 5 years trying to sell it as women's fiction, that's not what they want. It's
Okay.
just even within the Women's Fiction Writers Association, I've won 25 book awards and I couldn't get one sniff from them, and I think it was because of the sex, frankly.
Okay.
And I just think it's makes people uncomfortable and it's not what they're looking for in that genre. That's my opinion.
Okay. Got it. Cool. So we talked a little bit about limits that don't belong in romance. Do you want to say anything else about those limits?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, for creators, it's all about reading meter expectations, right? So these are guideposts that are just kind of established or done, usually like I talked about, if one of the characters dies, by definition, you're not going to have a happy ending. So like you can't have one of the characters die. Usually adultery is not welcomed and by one of the main characters except under like extreme circumstances. Um a lack of consent is definitely not welcome. Like you have to be really clear that the two characters when they're engaging in intimacy that they're consenting on both sides, and you'll see this especially in the last 3 years when the books come out multiple times within the story. Just because you consented at the beginning of the book does not mean that you're consenting later in the book. So they will do that repeat consent multiple times throughout the book. So it's not just like a once I did it in chapter 2 and I don't have to do consent again.
For
So
sure.
consent is really huge. And also like the mean girl dynamics. Those are kind of not really welcome. Usually it's in romance, you have like this nurturing group of people and friends, and if there is a mean kind of antagonist, they're on the outside and they're the one you're working against. They're not kind of in their friend group. You want to have some kind of loving, supporting friends for your protagonist, so that they have like a good support system. If you are familiar with like the heroine's journey, versus the hero's journey, the heroine's journey with like a group of people,
Mhm.
that's a very common dynamic and plot approach for romance.
Amazing. Thank you for that. So let's talk about what our next projects are, and I can jump in. I have finished my fourth novel, which is called Two Lifetimes. It is not romance, and it is although it has little bit of romance in there, but not a lot, not like my other books. And it's not. I don't think it's women's fiction. I think it's. I don't know what it is. I looked up the bisexual. Honestly, I
Let's
know.
talk.
I'm shooting myself in the foot. It's a dual timeline soul travel friendship novel. So you could say family saga, you could say book club.
Paranormal women's fiction.
What?
Paranormal women's fiction.
It's not paranormal. It's just two different
If you've
timelines.
got a dual timeline, but not time travel.
Right. Soul
Okay,
travel.
okay, okay, okay. Sorry.
Soul travel. So there's a little bit of magical realism when you get the whole story.
Paranormal women's fiction, girlfriend.
But the main characters are not all women. There's two women and there's two men.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. So I'm back in. Okay. So two life.
Paranormal women's fiction.
And right now it's with my editor, and I'm trying to decide if I'm going to query it or if I'm going to publish it. I am on the fence, so we'll see about that. And right now I'm at work on sort of ideating a three-book series about a tennis player and a hockey player who meet senior year of high school in the 1980s and about their global professional sports journey alongside their journey in love. So that one's really, really fun to plan. So what are you up to next?
I
Or
have I think my pretend title is Aurora for Rent, and it's about a 40 plus kind of poster girl for single womanhood, who's an entrepreneur and very unapologetic about being, she's bisexual and she's just loving her appetites all over the place. And she gets herself into some paparazzi trouble and kind of flees home to kind of hide, and finds that maybe she's ready to find love. And what does that mean if you're like a devout single person? Like, where does love fit into all of that? So that's a dual POV contemporary sapphic romance. Um, and I'm about a little over 33,000 words into that, and we'll see how that goes.
awesome. Very, very, very cool. Okay, I want to share our contact info, and then I would love to take questions. If anybody in the audience has questions, you can either raise your hand or put the question in the chat, and we'd love to chat with you. You can find me and everything about me at lynnegolodner.com, which I just put in the chat. Paulette, where can people find you?
PauletteStout.com.
Awesome, perfect.
And
I
at Paulette Stout author on social media.
and I'm Lynne Golodner on social media too, so you can find me wherever. What any questions from our audience? Would anybody like to ask a question or have a little chat with us? Yes, Wendy.
Sorry, had to unmute. Hi.
Hi. Good to see you,
So
Wendy.
nice to see you, Paulette. I'm always interested in learning about the behind the scenes, the writer's process. So I was curious, and I don't know if it carries from one book to the other or each one is separate, but like, do you start with the romance part? Are you starting with like the larger purpose issue? Like which part, like how does it all,
It's a
if
great
that makes
question.
any sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Wendy. Paulette, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for me, I have an issue that I want to tackle. So for the first part, I knew it was female pleasure. For the second one, I knew it was Me Too from a male perspective. For the third book, I knew it was race, class, and belonging. And the fourth, I knew I wanted to take on weight and body size. And then I looked, at my cast of characters in my series and who could best tell that story, who could embody that journey, and then I build that out from there. And then because it's a romance, what's the partner relationship? Where do they come from? What's their backstory? How do they navigate that? For me, when I was first writing my first multiple POV books, the issue I was having was like I had these two people on these separate journeys, but what they really need to be is the two people need to be on the same journey from two different perspectives. So they need to be both navigating the same space, and one person's journey is kind of like either hampering the other person's or advancing the other person's journey. So they need to be connected and related. So when you're planning it, you have, if you're doing a dual POV or how many you are, how do the characters' journeys intersect and how do they propel each other? So I think that's another thing to keep in mind.
Awesome. Thank you. For Woman of Valor, I honestly just wanted to pivot from writing nonfiction to writing fiction. And I had started writing this in 2011. I had 60 pages, and I'm like, well, if I'm writing fiction, what am I writing? And I pulled it out, and I'm like, well, there's something there. And when I wrote it in 2011, she wasn't happy in her Orthodox life. And when I came back to it in 2021, I said, I don't want to put another book in the world that trashes the Orthodox way of living. We have enough of that already. And so I wanted, all I knew is I wanted her to have some challenges but want to stay. And how was she going to reconcile that? Cave of Secrets, I wanted to write a Scotland novel. Because I went to Scotland on a writing sabbatical, and I'm like, what am I writing? And I always have Jewish identity or Jewish characters in my books. And so I started researching when I was there, Jews in Scotland, not a ton of them. And so I came up with some interesting real people in the 19th century who were fascinating. And actually, some stories seemed like they might have crossed paths, but there's no evidence. And one of the characters was a woman from London, but she married a Scot who wasn't Jewish, was rumored to be gay, and they were more like sister and brother. She was sort of like a beard in a way. So I had these, and the other one was a Jewish man who was the first Scottish doctor who was Jewish, and then he moved to London. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to bring them together in like a secret affair that didn't happen. And so then what? And so I ended up with a contemporary component to it, and they're sort of the ancestors. And then for I Love You, Charlie Tanner, I just knew I wanted a midlife protagonist. So she's 40, and I wanted her to lose her love or her partner, and find new love with a hot rabbi. That's all I knew. And that she would heal herself in the garden. That was the other thing. That by like gardening and cultivating crops and whatever, she would heal herself and get over the mourning and whatever. So that's all I knew. And it ended up having a murder in it and all kinds of issues. I did not see that coming, but yeah, I knew like I sort of, so like now so the one that's coming out, Two Lifetimes, the friendship novel, I just wanted to write a novel inspired by my friendship with my best friend Katie, who is Catholic, but I call her Rabbi Katie because she honestly knows more about Judaism than most Jews. And I met her in my 20s, which is 30 years ago, and I thought I've been convinced the whole time in a former life she was Jewish and I was probably Catholic. And so that's what this is sort of premised on. And the tennis and hockey series, honestly, I've been a tennis player since I was a kid, and I love it. And I love it. And I'm not a great tennis player, so I want a character who is. And then I grew up in a hockey family, and I loved heated rivalry, fine. But my dad played till he was 70, and we were always Red Wings fans and all this stuff. And I miss the 80s. And so I'm like, it's starting in the 80s, and it'll just be this like epic love story. So that's all I know. That's all I know. I don't know if that answers your question, Wendy.
One other thing I wanted to add to Wendy is, I think how I was raised, my dad was Jewish. He was raised in New York when that was like not welcome. Like he would go to get jobs and it was like, we're not hiring Jews, so he was very involved in the civil rights movement and he marched in Selma and went to jail and strikes and all the things. There's always this kind of fight for justice underpinning like what the conversations in our household and how he lived his adult life. So for me, that's also like a way, like I'm not, protesting in the streets, but I feel like I can give voice to potentially marginalized communities through my stories and give them a voice and hopefully make, a positive social impact in that way. So there is that other layer that I do keep in mind when I'm kind of choosing the plots and how I approach the stories.
I love that so much, Paulette. And I knew I liked you already, but that I like you more now. But like honestly, I also feel like again, that writing can bring out big issues, and I feel like I'm making an impact by confronting them and putting them out there and saying, let's engage with it in a way that's not so, in your face or maybe, upsetting in some way, but like, we can still get the issues out there and maybe imagine something different. So
Yep, for sure. And
yeah,
it's also about like creating the world you want to see around you.
I love that. That is so true. Absolutely so true. Anybody else have a question you want to ask or chit chat with us? Okay, so Lillian's asking, is there anything purpose-wise that you would never expect to read or write in a romance novel? Like, do either of us think that anything is off limits in the genre? So, I don't know. Do you want to go first?
It's interesting because I might have thought, serious medical, some, medical issues like dealing for a sick parent, that might be heavy, but then I read a book that did it beautifully, before I let go, is it Before I Let Go? Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting all Kennedy Ryan's book titles confused. But she did it really beautifully. I think that it all depends on the how it's handled
Mhm.
and how the characters react and where the story ends. So I think that the only thing, it's just I think the pregnancy thing is hard sometimes, but I know writers do it, the unexpected pregnancy. Um I think potential child abuse is hard. I don't know. I think it all depends on how it's handled. It really does.
I mean, it's
It's a
interesting.
great question though. It's a great question, Lillian.
Yeah, when I wrote Woman of Valor, I had to think about what kind of abuse happens at the children's school. And I did not want it to be sexual abuse. I didn't feel comfortable writing it. I didn't want to read it. I know it happens and it's horrible, but I didn't feel like it
Yeah.
needed attention. So I wanted it to be more like corporal punishment, which is not okay, but it has happened in schools, and I felt like I could hint at it without being graphic and still address that sometimes teachers, especially in more insular community schools, cross lines that they shouldn't, and that it needed to be addressed. And so, and also community shame and community um, keeping quiet about big issues, and especially in religious communities, I think that that needs to be addressed too. That it happens in so many ultra extreme religious communities that just to keep the community insular instead of outing really bad, horrible, damaging things, I think is wrong and it needs to
Yeah.
come up. So,
And if you think,
um,
yeah, and if you think about how like, the blowback that Colleen Hoover has gotten for a few of her stories and this could be all of the stories where she handled domestic violence and she seemed to be a little too sympathetic, and I feel like it's so again, it's about how it's handled. In her book Ugly Loved, I felt like there was a lot of toxic male energy and woman kind of subjugation in that book that was really kind of gross. So I feel like also it's being aware that these are sensitive themes and handling them delicately. I think, in terms of what's off limits, I definitely think child abuse is it's just on the page. It's hard. Like that one's hard because especially when you weigh that against, the demand for consent in romance,
Mhm.
that is a non-consenting situation. So I feels like there's a little bit of a tension there. And again, I'm not saying that you can't do it, but it just has to be done really thoughtfully.
I really do wonder, though, like these are all issues that happen, like even, female subjugation and toxic masculinity and really unhealthy relationship dynamics. I mean, these are real things. And like, where else could somebody maybe see, oh my gosh, this is me, or this is my sister or my neighbor. Wow, I never saw it. And now I saw it in a book, so I can do something about it. I can help. I feel like we shouldn't have things that are off limits. You're right, it's about how we handle it, but sometimes a book is the only way somebody can see themselves in a mirror and become wise to it, that there's like another option, that there's an out. So I do think that that's important. But yes, I think sensitivity readers, whenever there's doubt on anything, like you can
Yeah.
always find someone.
And to be fair, I think that when it came to It Ends With Us, the book was handled it much better than the movie did.
Oh yeah.
But I think there's a pattern of not calling it out. And I think that's what readers are concerned about. You're absolutely right, this stuff happens,
Yeah.
but it needs to be exposed for what it is. And when you don't, it
Yeah.
feels like you're condoning it. So like in
Yeah.
Ugly Love, it was not. It was never addressed. It
Mm,
happened on the page and it was left unresolved and nothing was ever called out about it. And it just felt like it was perpetuating it
yeah.
versus kind of calling it out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any last questions before we give away some books and give you guys some opportunities for future events? Anybody? Question? Okay. So I am giving away a free copy of Cave of Secrets, and this is available in ebook, paperback, or audio. So you'll tell me how you want it. And the winner of that is Wendy Kennar. So Wendy, congratulations. Please let me know what format you want. Actually, if you can, I have your email so I can get in touch with you and let you know
Thank you.
your option and we'll figure out how to get it to you. So
Thanks so
congratulations.
much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And
So I'm giving away a copy of Love Only Better. This is the current cover.
okay.
Cover 4. Um, and you can get it in the new ebook isn't out yet. So the new audio isn't out yet. So if you want to wait a few months and get the audio, otherwise you can get a print book, a signed print book. And if that is going to Jane Cunningham.
Yay.
So congratulations, Jane. We just need your address to get you the print book if you want. Otherwise, I'll send you an ebook.
Awesome. And we'll share your email with Paulette and she can be in touch and get that to you, Jane. So congratulations. Amazing. And all right. Well, I want to thank you all for being here. And I am going to give you just two options. The next author talks in April. So we're only on March 1st, but April 12th is Heidi Shertock. And we're talking about Jewish characters and sex in fiction. And then on April 26th, it's Sarah Ansbacher, and she writes a historical fiction, and it's about fact and fiction. How do you take real events and write fictitious stories? And I think we all do that a little bit, don't you think, Paulette?
Of course.
People ask me in every author talk, is this book about you or how much of you is in the book? And they want to see me in it, like, oh, you're Sally in Woman of Valor. I'm like, I'm so not. And they're like, was your first husband like Barry? I'm like, absolutely not. So those spicy scenes did not come from that marriage. So that's all.
Yeah,
Anyway,
the more I write, the less they're like me.
exactly. Yes, yes, we go beyond ourselves in subsequent books. So
Yes.
stick with us for the journey and read all of our books, lynnegolodner.com, paulettestout.com. Thank you so much for being here. It's just been a really fun conversation tonight. So thank you, Paulette.
Thank you, Lynn. Good night,
Thank you so
everybody.
much. Have a good night.
You too.